Howdy. I made a presentation kind of a video because I am not Mel Gibson. I don't know really how to make a real video. So we will check out this presentation, and on a few occasions we will jump off this presentation and I will show you a few things. For example, Google Earth and things like this. And I try to make this easier to watch for you. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for the feedback. So, mud volcanoes and salt lakes, somewhat a fresh view on the waters below. But first, I want to show you something again, and it's probably more related than you probably think at the beginning, and that's a picture I took maybe last year or something, and maybe it turned out that there are not only plasma dragons, but we also have plasmasauruses, like dinosaurs, plasmasaurs. Anyway, manna. Hebrew, Romanized, man, Greek, whatever, Arabic, sometimes, or archaically spelled manna, is described in the Bible and the Quran as an edible substance that God bestowed upon the Israelites while they were wandering the desert during the 40-year period that followed the Exodus and preceded the conquest of Canaan. Description. Biblical narrative. In the Hebrew Bible, manna is described twice. Once in Exodus, with the full narrative surrounding it, and once again in Numbers, as a part of a separate narrative in a description in the book of Exodus. Manna is described as being a fine flake-like thing, like the frost on the ground. It is described in the book of Numbers as arriving with the dew during the night. Exodus adds that it had to be collected before it was melted by the heat of the sun, and that it was like a coriander seed in size, but white in color. You might wonder why I start off with this, but you will figure it out. Because, first off, there's a company, Solar Foods, that creates food out of thin air. For the first time in history, humankind can produce food without burdening our home planet. And the thing is called Solane, protein out of thin air. Solane is an all-purpose protein which offers endless possibilities for the food industry. It is nutritionally rich, can taste like anything you use it for, and is unparalleled in its functionality. Solane is produced in Finland, in the world's first production facility producing food out of thin air. The new era of food production. Food production as we know it is entirely dependent on land and weather conditions. Protein production is a massively disproportionate squanderer of the Earth's resources. We are now entering the era of sustainable food production to liberate our planet from the burdens of agriculture. So, for everyone who still believes that what the ancient or somewhat ancient people were writing down in those big famous books and stuff, mythological tales, you might have to think again. Because apparently It's totally possible. What the people were telling in the Quran and the Bible is possible. And now you know why I said it again, because I made a video about this 1 year ago. Anyway, so let us talk a little bit about the waters, the muddy waters, the salt, and its role in an electric universe. We will start off this little presentation with a few parts of my mountain water paper, which got published in an international journal. And here on the right side, we see this feature from this one glacier in Switzerland I have been showing recently. A new approach to mountain forming, volcanism, glaciers, and the role of water in an electric environment. So now the following texts, this one is from this paper I made some time ago. Now it's almost 3 years. But anyway, we start off here, almost at the top. The Alps region is also known for its pile-dwelling settlements. Some are dated as far back as 5,000 years. Many of the settlements are submerged, but some are reconstructed and function nowadays as museums. Yeah, since I grew up in Central Europe, in Switzerland, I have been in one of those. Back in the days, we had a school trip to one of these. Maybe I have been there more than once, I don't remember. It's a long time ago. But it made a huge impression to me. According to archaeologists, the reason for building houses on piles is most likely preventing wild animals reaching the settlement. This never made any sense to me. I wondered why they didn't just build a fence. This theory suggests the reason for building houses on pillars clearly elevated from the ground might have been the occasional flooding. So we are talking, this theory is my theory, which is presented in this paper. In ancient times, flash floods may have occurred much more often because the region was much more active volcanically and geyser-like eruptions happened frequently and on a much larger scale. Remember mountain water, the glacier thing? Glaciers are lava streams made of water. So, active volcanically and geyser-like eruptions. We could imagine ancient people being very aware of the danger of flash floods. They also knew that water from mountain springs can also be very healthy. Maybe they had observation posts along known paths of flash floods and kept watching on certain eruptive sites. When an eruption occurred, someone was blowing into a horn to warn the people downstream, and they went up into their houses waiting for the flash flood to go by. Maybe this was also the reason why someone invented the Alp horn. It is a huge instrument and can be heard from great distances. It also could be that the iceman Ötzi was a watchman for the villagers downstream and he drowned in an eruption because he was simply too close. That's why there was just one person found and not a settlement. Another possibility is that he was a tactical target. It was discovered that he was badly injured and probably died through bleeding out. We must assume that the Alps region was home to many different tribes and groups of people. Some tribes needed someone to watch out for the water. Some tribes didn't have to. If there was some rivalry going on between tribes, it would have been a very tactical and strategical hit to the one watching. If he is gone, then maybe also the rest of the rivals are gone soon if an eruption happens and the settlement gets destroyed. This is just a very little part of the paper. Here is a picture of the pile dwelling in Unterhuldingen. Is an archaeological open-air museum on Lake Constance, Bodensee in Unterhuldingen, Germany, consisting of reconstructions of stilt houses or lake dwellings from the Neolithic and Bronze Age. Now back to the paper again. The floods in Brig were perhaps a non-poisonous cold lahar, a flash flood which is related to volcanic activity. Yeah, again, there are no volcanoes in the Alps, officially. Bad weather, heavy rain, and lightning were documented at the time of the event, indicating a huge electromagnetic potential was provided from the atmosphere. As much as the water which drops from the sky has different speeds according to the strength of the discharge, lightning may also reach upwards from the ground towards the heavens. Possibly, a weather system with enough electromagnetic potential could trigger an eruption from a sleeping cold water geyser, i.e. a cryptogeyser. And we have two pictures here. These are screenshots from a video. We have an electrical discharge going through some stone, metal stone plate, and beneath there we have a drop of water. And you can see how the electrical discharge penetrates through the stone and reaches the water. And seconds later, the water reaches up to the top. Now we have the first time to jump onto something else because I want to show you this video. Now let's watch it first with normal speed. There is no sound to it. Here you can see how the water starts to react to a very strong electromagnetic field. Here's basically the same thing again, a little bit scaled up. Here we can see how the water follows the electricity. He colored the water in order for it, like it's easier to see for everyone. Again, you can see how the water follows the electricity. And that's the thing. The water rises up. Now let's watch the same thing again. Slowed down. Let's make it half speed, otherwise this video will take many hours. I tried to keep it as short as possible. These experiments are some probably easily more than 10 years old. And greetings to Billy Uelverton, or however you spell your last name. Again, this is half the speed. So in other words, just imagine Earth getting crunched by huge geomagnetic storms and stuff like this. And if there would be some arcing, yeah, it would happen really, really fast. It wouldn't take millions of years for something to happen. This might be one of the best proof of my theory being more or less correct. If there would be a huge electromagnetic potential in the atmosphere, the water starts to rise up. So now back to this presentation thing. Possibly a weather system with enough electromagnetic potential could trigger an eruption from a sleeping cold water geyser, i.e. a crypto geyser. In other words, the water that would pour out of the ground doesn't need to be hot, but it can get heated up, of course. It might quite likely will be heated up if there's enough plasma. Here's once again the same pictures, just a little bit bigger. Here we just see how the electricity makes it through the rock. And here we can see how the water is rising upwards. And just for everyone wants to see again, geothermal features in Europe. Here is a very interesting part in northern Germany. And if you look at Turkey, there is a huge geothermal potential. And we also need to note that there is no markings or whatsoever in the seas. And also this big gray area which stretches through whole Europe, where we don't have any data. Here we don't have any data from here, Spain, Portugal either. And also up here, Ireland. Doesn't mean that there is nothing. All right. So this is the last video I made about mud volcanoes. The best video about mud volcanoes you have ever seen. Yeah. I tried to make a better one now. So the next few slides are from this video. Then I will put a link below to the video where you find all the resources. For example, this paper, Mud Volcano Eruptions and Earthquakes in the Northern Apennines and Sicily, Italy. These are just screenshots from that video. These are some recap things in order for you to catch up for those who haven't seen my last video, if it was too difficult to watch. We will start here. We will read this little chapter here because it's very interesting. The oldest and perhaps most famous chronicle reporting an apparent link between a mud volcano eruption and an earthquake is likely that provided by the Roman writer Plinius. Now, I really wonder if we are talking about the Plinian eruption. There are different styles of volcanic eruption. One is a Plinian eruption, who reported evidence in his Historia Mundi Naturalis for a large eruption contemporaneous with the destructive earthquake of 91 BC that struck important towns nearby the Pede Apennine margin. This writer described the 91 BC eruption as skyscraping flames and two steam columns seen from about 10 kilometers distance to occur in the Apennines foothills, which are still the focus or locus of current mud volcano activity. That's probably locus. The locality of this relevant historical eruption has been traditionally placed at the Monte Gipio Salsa. Salsa is a mud volcano in Italy, Italian language. But to date, its exact position is still not clearly defined. This is the map I have been showing now a few times because it's just very interesting. For those who haven't seen this map yet, all those yellow dots, there are many, these are all mud volcanoes that are submerged. And the orange dots here on land are mud volcanoes on land. And these are just the known ones. And for scale, the orange dots here on land, which we have in Italy, there are 61 volcanoes. And it seems to me that there are much more volcanoes in the sea, much more than 61. And these are just the known ones. Seabed photographs showing various details of mud volcanoes in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Brine fluid pool on top of Napoli, A. South of Crete, B to G. Egyptian continental margin, B. Brine fluid pool on Hefrem mud cone, Menes caldera. C and D. Brine lake with bacterial filaments and brine stream on a mud cone. There would be two pictures more, but I think you get the idea. We have somewhat heavy water. It's so salty it just stays in those pools. And here it doesn't stay in the pools. It flows away. And if there's like mud volcano somewhere else where we have strong currents, you could imagine this gets carried away. All this brine, all those salts, these pools might be the reason for why the seas are salty. Yeah, you can imagine if we have a few hundred of these just alone in the Mediterranean, where we have salt pouring out all the time. Yeah, it makes the water salty. We have mud volcanoes on land and in the seas. Some of them are associated with brine, i.e. salt. We need to expect to find salty volcanoes on land, right? These are just two comparisons. This is a salt lake. And this is one of the submerged volcanoes we just watched. Yeah, they look somewhat similar. They might not look as you expect a lake is supposed to look like. So let's make a little trip with Google Earth. Hold your seat and fasten your belts. So now we jump off this little presentation and go over to Google Earth. Yeah, actually, I don't show you this now because I want to stick to what we have. So, this is the area I just showed you. And I call it Lincoln Peak because it doesn't really have a name. Because if you look here, everything, but it doesn't say anything about this. And we could spend hours and hours and hours looking at these things. And I have been spending hours and hours looking at these things. So I made a little list. But first, actually, you have to go back again. No, we don't. It's maybe easier because you might remember at the beginning, I was talking about the Israelites about the solar food. They were wandering through the desert, the Sinai Desert. Solar Lake is a saline desert lake located on the edge of the Red Sea, about 18 kilometers south of Eilat in the Sinai Peninsula. This might be that there's just seawater basically through some holes pouring into that lake. But we had the solar food, the Sinai Desert, and now we have a salt lake too. So now let's just check out three of these. And actually, where is it? Just to show you. 10 of the lakes I marked. I was too lazy and I wanted to make sure that I pick out the right ones. 10 saline lakes in the world. Now let's go back to Google Earth, and you probably noticed that there are many more, much more than just 10. This is what I meant by spending many hours of looking at these. Let's pick this one. There are many of those in the Americas. Bald Mountain Salt Lake. Yeah, it's the closest landmark I could find. And the thing is, what I want to point out is that some of them show activity. You might have to look a bit closer, but there's activity going on here. Activity going on here. Some of them, they might get flooded if there's rainfall and stuff. But many of them, Ain El Hamar. Now let's jump on the other side of the globe. Many of these, they show still some activity. This might be an impact crater, and we will come back to the impact crater again. And I am not talking about meteoritic impact craters. Just for you to know. We have water in the desert. And like I said, I could make a live stream that would last for a week, show you so amazing things. And I was basically also just searching for water. Now let's zoom out a little bit. Just have a look quickly of what we find. Because it's about the water, after all. So there seems to be water. And some geology. Apparently, this seems to be the same place. Maybe it was raining. It stuck. It got stuck there, the water, and then it dried out. But there is also caves, and it seems that there is water down there. Now let's pick another one. Water. This might be salt there in the background. Some geology. We could talk hours about this. More geology. Another hours. Another bunch of hours just about these kind of things. How they came into being. Water. Right? Half lake. Yeah, this is an name I gave to this feature. This might be also this kind of a salty spring, let's call it like this, which seems to be partially buried beneath the sand. That's just amazing. And I also found the belly button of Africa accidentally. I was just looking around. There's a city government office there. Really? And in order for you to know why it's probably called the belly button of Africa, we need to zoom out a little bit. Let's put this away. Yeah. The belly button of Africa. And I think I found the smaller belly button of. Let's just zoom in here onto this feature. It might be very well possible that there's every now and then water pouring out of this thing here, brings up the sand, as we have in, or had back in the days when we had the big quake in America. Mississippi River flowed backwards, and we had the sand blowout. So now, if you think that we only have salty water in Africa or the salty lakes in America, then I have to show you this. Let's zoom out first a little bit. These yellow place marks I made. So all those yellow place marks. But Salzungen, salt. And in German language they are called Sohle. So there is the whole town. Obviously, there's. Where is it? Now here we have water in the city, fountains and stuff. This might be a tower where they dig down and get some more salt. But there's also this kind of a, what is it? Bath, heating spring. Then we have up here in the north where we had the geothermal potential earlier. Bad Mendorf. Bad means bath. Yeah, there's like water all over the place. Maybe they are just showing you how healthy the water is. These might be some elderly bathing uh, facilities. This might be the main bath. I don't know. Might be something else too. Now let's just look at one still and then we go back to the, what is it, presentation thing. Let's go to Russia. Lake Bashkunchak. Lake Bashkunchak is a salt lake. There might be another one, yet another one. And it really seems that there is some activity going on within the lake. So the water of the lake is coming from below. There are some more in Russia. Here is one. There are many, many. Brunishko ozero. And also here, it appears that there is something going on beneath the surface. Quite much as I have been showing you in my glacier lakes. Yeah, there might be some rusty trails there. There's still one left. Yeah, I don't think that's ice. Yeah, there are many. Like I said, I spent many, many hours. Was is Wilbert? Let's check this still out. Where do we go from here? Merrick. Yeah, I found this also. Accidentally. Maybe, maybe not accidentally. But anyway, I saw this feature. And as I explained earlier, electromagnetic potential pulls the water up. So if we have an electric discharge, it might connect to the waters below. And if it connects deep enough, or there is already salt water present in a rather shallow depth, we all know that salt water is highly conductive, so it makes its way upwards probably easier. And many, many of the water springs we are still used today, they are probably created by electromagnetic discharge events, and they are still functioning today. Once the discharge makes the connection through the waters below, through the crust, there might remain a connection to the waters below and the water will come up. Every now and then, the water stops coming up, but in many ancient tales, they were talking about the fourth coming of the waters. Yeah, there's no pictures. But, water. And how big is this? Let's just quickly measure this. 380 meters. Let's say 400. And it's in the middle of nowhere. Or in the middle of everything. However you want to call it. One green tree or a few bushes already indicate that there's something. Water isn't too far from there. They're like, I found so many things, which was one reason for why it took me a while to get this video together. Because the more I looked, the more I found. So the evidence for my theory being correct is overwhelming. Now let's try to continue with this presentation. That's also a picture from a salt lake. This we already have seen. I just wanted to show. And here we are talking about the Great Salt Lake in Utah. U of Utah. Geologists investigate reed-covered mounds that reveal spots where ancient groundwater reaches daylight. August 31st, 2025. So I have to say that I highly doubt that there's some ancient water because it's H2O. H stands for hydrogen, which is the most abundant element in the universe. And there is a whole bunch of oxygen as well here. So water gets created all the time. It just depends on the electromagnetic potential overall on the environment. As the Great Salt Lake shrinks, scientists are uncovering mysterious groundwater-fed oases hidden beneath its drying lake bed. Reed-covered, which is a grass, reed-covered mounds and strange surface disturbances hint at a vast underground plumbing system that pushes fresh water up under pressure. Using advanced tools like airborne electromagnetic surveys and piezometers, researchers are mapping the hidden freshwater reserves and testing whether they could help restore fragile lakebed crusts, reduce dust pollution, and reveal long-buried secrets of the region's hydrology. Yes, scientists stunned as strange islands and hidden springs appear. Yeah, once again, scientists are stunned. So, in other words, this is a very, 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 very good proof for many of those lakes. Salt lakes are fed from below. In other words, we have to take into account that there might be a huge fluctuation over time in the amount of water coming out, also in the quality of the water that is coming out. Sometimes it might be very salty, sometimes it might be fresh, sometimes it might be cold, sometimes it might be very hot, and sometimes it might be just very, very muddy, very dirty water, or even just mud. Yeah, mud volcanoes, salty mud volcanoes. And the freshwater volcanoes, and if they are in areas where the general temperatures below zero, the water that comes out of the ground on top of a mountain, for example, or in the Arctic, or Antarctica, or Greenland, yeah, it will freeze over, but it doesn't stop the water coming out. And as the water is pouring out of the ground in freezing temperatures, there will be ice accumulation, i.e., we get a glacier. So, if water gets pulled upward, is there any evidence that remained? Now, this is the upheaval dome, and the white stuff here is salt. Electric discharge, not an impact, caused formation of upheaval dome. Canyonlands National Park, Utah. Robert Hawthorne Jr. Yeah, greetings, Robert. He managed to get registered documents done about this, but I thought I'd make this video and using his old paper about the same thing because it's part of a surprise for him. Good friend, Robert Hawthorne. So now let's read a quick into this. This paper will provide an argument that Upheaval Dome, Canyonlands National Park, Utah, USA, is a product of electrical discharge machining, EDM. Currently, two theories remain from a myriad of possible theories for the site's formation. The first being a prehistoric salt diapir or dome that has completely eroded away. The second theory being of impact origin from either a meteor or even a comet. This paper will provide evidence for a more plausible theory that electric discharge can provide the temperatures and forces necessary to shock quartz crystals similar to those found in meteorites and other tektites. Experimental evidence will be provided from an individual who uses low-pressure chamber to form cratering patterns and demonstrates transient lunar phenomena or moon flashes without impacts. Information will be given on fulgurites or rock formed from lightning and are melted into glass. Also, how this vitrification mechanism can be attributed to a new form of mineral analcime, commonly called the obsession stone, which is considered as possible ejecta from the upheaval dome site. Now, here, the salt diapir theory of upheaval dome. According to a geologist from the University of Texas, M.P.A. Jackson, and his team with regards to the pinched-off salt dome theory state, we propose that an overhanging diapir of partially extrusive salt was pinched off from its stem and subsequently eroded. Yeah, maybe the extrusive salt isn't too far-fetched if you remember what I showed you when the water is rising up, and if there's salt water rising up and the heat sustains for a sufficient time, it eventually will dry up. The salt will dry up. The water evaporates, but the salt remains. Many features support this interference, especially sedimentary structures that indicate Jurassic growth of the dome over the last 20 million years. Like I said and showed you before, if there's enough electricity, it doesn't need millions of years. They continue, we inferred that abortive salt glaciers, I have never seen or heard of a salt glacier, spread from a passive salt stock during the late Triassic and early Jurassic time. Once again, they figure out some very weird theories and try to cover it up by millions of years because they cannot reproduce any of these theories in a laboratory. So you just buried it beneath billions of years. During Middle Jurassic time, the Allochthonous salt, Allochthonous, the word means we have autochthonous, parachthonous, and allochthonous. As far as I remember, autochthonous means if you go somewhere, if you go in a birch forest and you find a birch leaf, it originates from the birch tree. Okay, and then we have parachthonous. So if you go into a birch forest and you find a pineapple, it's not from there because there's no pineapple trees or something. And if you go into a place where you only find stuff that isn't from the origin, from where it should be, everything came from somewhere else, possibly from somewhere far away, i.e., no one knows where it came from, then we're talking about an allochthonous area. In this case, maybe the salt just originated from the ground below. Because, for example, here in Finland, there is also a layer of salt water rather deep, and I heard from a rather trustful source that not too far from here, there is a little hill where I went downhill biking several times before I broke my collarbone. And in wintertime, there is a ski resort, and they try to have those snow cannons. And they were drilling holes into the mountain. No, mountain is maybe too much said. Into the hill in order to get water for the snow cannons. And one of the snow cannons basically functioned perfectly, but the only problem was the water didn't really freeze over. So they were really wondering what's going on. It turned out the reason for why the water not freezing over is because it's salt content. Yeah, salt water. And we are a few hundreds of miles from the nearest sea, the Baltic Sea, which isn't that salty. And also, we have a lot of clay and vitrified clay. Almost all the rocks here in this region are vitrified clay. Yeah, mud volcanoes. They erupt with clay. And some of them are salty. But anyway, during Middle Jurassic time, the allochthonous salt spread into a pancake-shaped glacier inferred to be 3 kilometers in diameter. This theory has less support because any evidence for the salt type here was washed away. Further evidence from Brian Creans and Brigham Young University along with Shoemaker posthumously give the evidence of the top of the underlying salt horizon is at least 500 meters below the surface at the center of the dome. Right? Like I said, if there is salty water beneath and an electric discharge, it will rise up. And there are no exposures of salt or associated rocks of the paradox formation in the dome to support the possibility that a salt diapir has ascended through it. This shows that the salt dome theory is losing support. Yeah. Now, once again, for a recap, an atmospheric discharge will create the heat. Provided enough heat, everything will dry up and will remain in place. We have the updraft. Here we have the water that's rising up, and if it's salt water, yeah, the water evaporates, but the salt remains. Was that the last slide? Yeah, this was the last slide. So I think I leave it here. I will put the links to the resources down there, and I will put the link to the video, to the earlier mud volcano video, where you find a whole bunch of resources too. Yeah, that's it for this time. I tried to make a better video about mud volcanoes. And here just can take a look at this at Robert's paper. I will put a link below to this as well. And I probably will put the newer version of this paper that is a registered document also down below. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks. Bye.